Buonasera. Just seeing who's here. Hello, thank you for coming to this session. My name is James Corbishley and I work for ShareGate, obviously. And hopefully most of you were in the keynote session this morning where Zlata talked about the ShareGate products. So we obviously have ShareGate Migrate, which is a very well-known tool which helps migrate tenant to tenant, but mainly well known for SharePoint migrations to 365. And recently, 6 or 7 months ago, we introduced a new product to our portfolio called ShareGate Protect, which is all around the governance of 365, understanding the risk profile, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So about 20-minute session to give you a flavor of what the product is. I'm not going to give you a demonstration, but you're more than welcome to come by the booth and I can show you the tool in more depth. But yeah, thank you again for joining me today. So what is the premise of ShareGate Protect? So loads of different statistics flying around the internet about how critical business data is, what's being overshared, things like people sending out anyone links, everyone external user links, people sharing documents internally without really understanding the consequence of that sharing. So, and also in terms of the recent adoption of AI tools like Copilot, obviously that introduced some risk elements because people are sharing documents with external users, with guests, with even internal users that they shouldn't potentially have access to. So, as you can see, one of the statistics we pulled out, Gartner did a big survey. Around 40% of organizations had to delay their Copilot rollout because they weren't aware of what content could be surfaced by those AI tools, right? Pretty critical. You can imagine someone doing some searching, very powerful searches because, Copilot and other tools don't have any boundaries. They will literally surface the data that is available to them. And so people do some searching and they can potentially get access to data that's not appropriate to them or could compromise personal data, etc. So that's why ShareGate decided to introduce a product called Protect. And the idea of Protect is to provide that kind of continuous governance over your 365 environment. Currently, the way that it works, and we'll go into more depth in the next slide, but the idea is to provide complete visibility to your 365 environment. It's currently focused very much on the document side of things, so it's looking at Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc., group access, understanding, how many users you've got in the tenant, storage consumption, information relating to, as I said before, oversharing, links that are shared. So you've got a complete visibility to your 365 environment. And the way that it works is we're constantly crawling that tenant. So it's a SaaS service that sits in the Western Europe Azure data center and crawls the data and visualizes that information into a UI. So you can imagine it being a kind of sits on top of that 365 admin stack, which is, in my opinion, a little bit cumbersome to navigate. We provide one UI, one GUI to go in there, get visibility to all that information. And what that does, once we've actually got that information and visualized it, is helps you understand the potential risks. So we're looking at the risk detection. So as I mentioned before, oversharing, inactive workspaces. So that's a big thing where you've got data that isn't potentially used or has orphaned users or orphaned managers, so it's not being governed. Things like guest access, so someone could have given access to Teams, SharePoint data to external guests, left the business, nobody's got any visibility onto who has access to that data outside of the business. So really important to understand those risks. And then what we're bringing into the product in the next couple of weeks, which we're really, really excited to bring to the product, is automated reviews. So based on that risk detection, we can say, okay, you can see you've got 4 SharePoint sites or these teams don't have a manager, or because that user may have left the business or may have been moved into another role. This helps you understand in terms of automating the review, so we can say, okay, send this person a review process to say, this team hasn't been given or is unmanaged, who needs to have access to it. So we're having what we call a delegated kind of collaboration. So an automated review process on that. And then on the 23rd of June, we are releasing our MCP server. So we think this is going to be huge. We're the first product in the market to have MCP integration, which means based on all the visibility and the risk detection you get in the tool, you can plug in your own agents, Copilot, Claude, etc., into your MPC interface, and you can obviously use the power of search, etc., through those tools and agents to surface all the data that we've got. So this has tons of different consequences. It can provide real-time reporting. We're talking about potential partners going into a customer, being able to use and leverage this MCP server to very quickly analyze a customer environment and provide real-time reporting in like an hour, because you could create the agents to create reports in specific ways. So really, really powerful. We've been developing this for a couple of months. That's coming out June the 23rd. So yeah, how does it work? So once it's set up, and the setup's very, very simple. There's no kind of service account. You don't need global admin that sits within the tenant to actually, as a service account, obviously that provides a security kind of hole. So we would just require an enterprise app to be created with a very simple authorization and consent piece. So there's no agents, no scripts. It sits within the Azure, Western or America. You can select either way, but allows you to very quickly connect to the tenant. And based on we've done loads of optimizations. So based on recent statistics, 10,000 user tenant with terabytes of data, you're looking sort of 10, 15 hours to do that initial crawl and to surface that information. And then what we do is we continually running and crawling that data and surfacing that information. So although not exactly real time, it's very close to that. So if you look at some of the things within Purview within the Microsoft 365 stack, you can only run reports, say once every 28 days, or you've got limited access, or it's a point-in-time reporting mechanism. ShareGate Protect will provide you that constant reporting capability and also insights over time. So once you've installed it and it's running and it's crawling, we collect that data, and over time you can actually see trends. So for example, if you introduced a policy to your users to say, this is the way you should be showing your documents, you'll be able to actually show that in a visual way through the insights. And the idea is that, that continuous monitoring, it does capture risks. So I get lots of customers asking me, this is great, we'll set it up, we can look at the initial problems, we can fix those problems, what happens after that? Why do you need to continually crawl your 365 tenant? And it's all about, the risks that's being introduced, because, with AI tools, Copilot, etc., new people coming into the environment, new data being shared every day, permission changes, people leaving the business, all these things, need to be continually monitored and controlled. So that's why ShareGate Protect does that continual piece. And then not only does it allow you to report on it and detect on it, but we also have remediation functions. So based on what I was talking about before in terms of the automation, at the moment you can run reports based on a whole ton of criteria, loads of different metadata points, and filtering capability, even with natural language reporting. You can surface this information, and then you can actually perform remediation actions on that. So for example, if one of the things we do is report licensing, so you can unassign licenses to people that don't need them, or assign licenses, or more importantly, you can do things like delete sharing links, and things like create or remove owners from teams and add permissions, etc. So these are some of the common questions. So as I've mentioned before, talking to customers and partners particularly, because this tool is very useful for partners. I don't know how many out there, you guys out there actually work, as a MSP or an SI, work with end users. Some of our customers actually use this as an offering to provide their customers, a security point to help them understand how to govern their 365 environment. But what's really important to talk about, even internally or to your external customers, is we've got 4 kind of distinct pillars in what we actually look at and provide and surface that information. First one is around cost optimization. So what we look at is we look at licensing, we'll look at inactive workspaces, things like enabling you to right size your 365 environment by looking at storage and the way that the storage is actually utilized in the organization. So we'll surface all the SharePoint sites, how much data is being utilized. If you're over that initial threshold of Microsoft and you've got that extra spend every month, you're able to look at something and say, hey, this is an orphan team, this is an orphan site. We could potentially archive that, which is the function that hooks into the native Microsoft archiving and allows you to, or even delete the content as well. So you've got that kind of cost optimization piece, which is obviously very important. Second one, which I think is the most, the biggest concern or the biggest risk profile, is around the oversharing and access control, which I mentioned before. As it's obvious, really, it's all about guest accounts, unstructured sites or overshared sites, broken permissions, inherited permissions that are incorrect. All of those things get surfaced within the tool. And this is really critical. This is the kind of the fundamental piece of the Protect tool. And with that remediation piece in the back, you can actually automate the correction of these things. Third pillar is around sprawl and orphan data. So sprawl, I think we've all seen in 365 environments, particularly after 2020 and the joy of COVID, where everyone started working from home, huge explosion of use of Teams, people creating all sorts of content, loads of information being put in Teams, and that very quickly became unmanageable. So you've got that classic sprawl. So this will help you understand, how many teams you've got, visualize exactly the information, but also, more importantly, who accesses and who controls that data. So very important around, orphan data in terms of that cost optimization piece, but also understanding the data and who has access to that. And then the fourth pillar is kind of, call it Copilot readiness, but for those that have also implemented Copilot, we're looking at surfacing all that information about, again, it's kind of oversharing, but which users can access what, and, in terms of enabling a customer to enable Copilot potentially, if you have a tool like Protect in place, it will actually help you say, okay, your environment's ready for Copilot usage now. So this is a great tool to implement prior to Copilot installation, but also post, because you've got that continual admin function running, people getting added and people getting removed, etc. So, and this is a little bit more on, that whole Copilot piece. It doesn't create a problem, but this is one of these things that's really important to discuss with your customers or internally. Using AI tools, fantastic. I think we all agree it's an extremely powerful tool, but it does create an additional risk, right? And something that you do not, or you should not and cannot ignore, because you could potentially be surfacing data that is not appropriate. So, as I mentioned before, in terms of Copilot, it respects permissions, but it will surface information. It doesn't say, oh yeah, this is broken. This information is accessible by everybody, so that information is going to be surfaced. ShareGate, maps the risks, as I mentioned before in the previous slide. Talking about that whole idea that you actually use Protect to surface this information and fix that before deploying Copilot. And yeah, the last kind of box on the bottom there kind of consolidates that. So the idea is, what does it deliver and what does the client feel? So the whole idea is, talking internally, asking if you went to your IT or if you were an IT administrator, someone came to you and said, okay, who's got access to what? Do you know what teams haven't been accessed? Do you know what information is going to be surfaced by Copilot? If we had some audit requirement, do you know what's actually going to come out of that audit? Do you know what guests have access to your environment? And usually the answer to many of those questions is kind of. We've got an idea, but we don't have a full complementary idea of how wide that kind of oversharing or risk is. And that's exactly what Protect does. So just to kind of mention it again, it provides that complete visibility to 365. As I mentioned before, document workloads, mailbox, etc. is going to be coming, but focusing very much on the sharing of documents, as that's where the challenges are. Looking at automated review process so that we can actually look at who has access, providing information to internal stakeholders to allow them to make decisions on who should have access. So automating that, the control of that. Making sure that we identify oversharing prior to Copilot or other AI deployments. Making sure we've got audit or auditable information because you've got timelines and insights relating to all this information. And lastly, one of the most important things I'd say is guest access to the 365 tenant, and it's always running, always providing that feedback information straight away, particularly when you've got things like the MCP server integration coming. You'll be able to very quickly, provided you created agents, but very quickly be able to analyze or ask questions, who's got access to this document, or how many orphan sites have we got, or what's the storage utilization of SharePoint, right? So really, really powerful. That MCP integration is going to be huge. And talked a little bit around this before in terms of lots of customers go, yeah, there's loads of tools out there. We have admin tools, we've got Microsoft Purview. We just run these things or need to run these things every so often. So these are kind of the common objections that are very relevant. One, and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but in terms of use of Purview. So yeah, we've got Purview. Purview governs content. There's a lot of information in all different types of places. We allow it to consolidate that information into one UI, but also to provide kind of remediation actions. And it's, as I mentioned, it's not based on a one-time report, it's based on a continual crawl. And what about the 365 tenants that do not have Purview licensing, right? Because that's only for enterprise customers. So you're looking at customers with business essentials, etc. Those customers aren't covered by Purview. So very, very relevant for those guys as well. People say, oh yeah, this is great. We've done the initial audit. We've fixed all the problems. They've all gone away. We're A-OK. Yeah, you might be okay for 1 or 2 weeks, but what happens if you get someone showing another document, or you get someone making a change, or someone making a mistake in terms of oversharing information? This is where it's critical to have a tool that is running continually to help you understand those ongoing risks, but also, because of the insights that Protect provides, allows you to show internal stakeholders over time a trend on that kind of risk as well. And yeah, we're not deploying Copilot yet. We don't need to use a tool like Protect. This is exactly when you do need to use Protect, because that's exactly when you need to understand the challenges you've got and understand exactly what information Copilot could potentially provide. And 4 seconds left. That's right on the button. That's my 20 minutes. I hope you were interested in Protect. Thank you very much for coming to see me and to listen to the information about Protect. And as I mentioned, we're over in the booth, just on as you're coming in, just on the left-hand side. If you haven't seen us already, come by and see us. We've got lots of cool socks and maybe a few mugs left, maybe. But yeah, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here. Grazie mille.